Welcome, fellow business brokers. Thank you for joining us today. So we're looking at 2020. We got the pandemic that was going on. We got some businesses that did horrible in 2020. We got other businesses that did great in 2020 because of the pandemic. We got PPP situations, idle loan situations, forgiveness or payment by the government for SBA loans. We just got a lot of different moving parts going on. And as business brokers, what do we do? How do we add things back? How do we recast the financials? What can we expect to see on P&Ls and tax returns for last year, for 2021 moving forward? And then how do we value the business? And so I'm really excited today because we've got three different professionals. We've got a CPA with us. We've got an SBA lender with us, and we got an appraiser with us. And all three of these people are at the top of their game. All three of them are really well known for what they do. So we should be really thankful to have them with us today. But before I begin, if you have not already, please support this program and click down below and subscribe to this YouTube channel. It would be greatly appreciated. But I want to go ahead and introduce our panel. First, I want to introduce Tom Osborne. He's a CPA with Kelsey Osborne, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you for joining us, Tom.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be here.
And then we got with us Lynn Singletary. She's an SBA lender with First Internet Bank. How are you doing today, Lynn?
I'm well. Happy to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. And then we got Darren Mize with GCF Business Valuations, and he's also one of the founders of Peer Comps. Thanks for joining with us today, Darren.
It's my pleasure to be here, and looking forward to all of the discussion. Should be a good one.
Well, I think it's going to be a great one, and I'm really glad all three of you guys are on here because everything kind of plays with each other. So, everything that you guys all do kind of all works together. So, Tom, I'm going to ask you first because I really think that it's important that business brokers understand this. How are the PPP monies going to be handled on the profit and loss statement and tax return? The Paycheck Protection Program monies, the PPP monies, be handled on the P&Ls and the tax returns for the year end 2020?
After they've been forgiven, they're gonna be considered debt forgiveness. Debt forgiveness is considered income. It's not operating income. It's non-operating income, if you will. It's not going to be included in the gross receipts. It'll be showing up as other income on a traditional income statement. For tax purposes, it will not be taxable. It's still going to show up as income, but it's not going to be taxable on the tax return.
Okay. So a few things there, just so we can delve into that. Right now, before it's forgiven, it's going to show up on the balance sheet because it's a loan, right? So it'll show up on the balance sheet and it will not appear on the profit and loss statement at all, correct?
That is correct.
And then once it's forgiven, it will show up on the profit and loss statement under other income and be removed from the balance sheet, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So, and then as Darren, maybe you can chime in here, but as we work as business brokers, that's going to be considered other income. It should be considered other income, and we're not going to look at that, right, Darren?
That's correct. And like Tom said, we treat it exactly as non-operating income. We shouldn't even see it on the income statement at all. And from a balance sheet standpoint, as we prepare our normalized balance sheet, we're moving it down to other liabilities until it's forgiven. Then we zero it out. Until then, we're essentially treating it as passive equity, as an equity injection. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. You don't want to include it in current assets because it's going to mess up your ratios, and it doesn't make sense putting it there because it's not going to be paid back.
Right.
Okay. Excellent. So, one of the things I wanted to point out, because, I deal with a lot of, business owners that are doing the books themselves. I've seen paycheck PPP money booked as other income when it shouldn't be on the P&L. So I'm asking everybody that I'm doing it for now, if where that PPP money is, it shouldn't be on the P&L until it's forgiven. But, I'm asking anyways, and then it should be on other income. And we never add back other income because that's not real income. Correct?
Yeah.
We're all on the same page?
All on the same page.
Tom, this is where I'm confused at though, Tom, because it's usually when monies are forgiven, loans forgiven, it shows up as income, correct?
That is correct.
But they passed a law last year that they're not going to tax the PPP money. right?
When the law that the PPP loan came out in, the original intent was never to have the income forgiveness taxable.
Okay.
That's been since the get-go. There was the concern about the wages that were paid with the proceeds, but that kind of got straightened out. At first, the IRS determined that the wages wouldn't be able to be deductible, but the stimulus law that they just signed last month corrected that. So there's not going to be any tax impact whatsoever for the loan forgiveness of the PPP loans.
Okay. Okay. So if the money is not showing up as income, but it's being, but you're still able to expense it out, are you getting a double tax benefit there as a business owner or not?
More or less, you're able to deduct the expenses, and you get the tax-free income for the loan forgiveness. So I would say you're definitely getting a positive result.
Okay.
At the very least.
Okay. Okay. And so Lynn, I want to bring you in on this because this is really important. We now know how the CPA is looking at it and how Darren as an appraiser is looking at it. How are the banks right now looking at the PPP situation?
Right. So we're, from an income standpoint, we're the same way. And we've kind of all gotten sort of direction verbally from SBA when we talk to them, that's the way we need to look at it. So we cannot include the income in the revenue stream of the company that we're looking at. Now, the interesting thing, Tom, that you just said was you can deduct the expense for labor, which is helping the business when it comes to tax time. But when an underwriter is looking at the business, and let's say, Jim, you've got a business that you're selling, and so you have a seller who maybe had been detrimentally affected in 2020, got the PPP money, was able to stay afloat because they got that money, and maybe their business was not that detrimentally affected, but they expensed those labor costs. So when you look at their percentage of labor to revenue, it's probably going to be higher in 2020 because they don't have the revenue, but they were able to expense the labor. So from an underwriter standpoint, there's going to be some more hoops to jump through as we're analyzing companies in 2020 to kind of understand that and digest that and roll that into the decision making.
Okay.
That's an interesting point that you're making there, because what we're seeing is there are a lot of businesses that got PPP loans that were really not affected much by the pandemic. So when you look at their ratios, if you look at their ratios of as a percentage of sales, what their wages and salaries are, they're almost like they're running identical or comparable to prior years. So what's entities like that, the PPP income's throwing everything off on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So, by simply ignoring the income, it's going to give you a better, you'll be okay. But with the companies that really had to use that PPP money to keep their people employed, their ratios are going to be messed up.
Yeah, because if they got that PPP money, if they wouldn't have gotten that PPP money and they were doing bad in their business, they may have laid off labor or cut back on hours.
That's
Exactly.
And
Well, exactly. So when they didn't lay people off, their income's way down. So it makes their profitability ratios look really bad.
all right, so this opens up some. Darren, how do you think we should handle this from an appraisal standpoint, or business brokers should handle this valuing the business? Should we take this into account? Should we normalize the labor costs, or what do you recommend we do?
Well, obviously, from a valuation standpoint, you really can't normalize labor because it's labor. You're paying your people, right? So as Tom mentioned, there's some benefit here to from a tax standpoint in a variety of different ways. One of which is that if your revenue is not coming in, but you're still paying your people, your profits are going down, your taxes are going to be less. I mean, so obviously from a tax standpoint, you have that as a benefit. Obviously, the opposite side of that is if you're not bringing in any money, at some point, other things are going to start to go awry. From our approach in terms of valuation, there's not much that we can really do accept, wait, and see how things are progressing along the way. So when, when Jim, when you and I did the first series of this similar discussion back, I think last year in June, May or June, we weren't at that point really in a position to understand the impact of all of this just yet financially. We were making a lot of assumptions and trying to figure out where everything was headed. But by August, September, October, and obviously we're in the first quarter of 2021, we're beginning to see the financial impact to all different kinds of businesses out there. Some good, some bad, obviously. There's a big mix. So from a valuation standpoint, our responsibility is to do a couple of things. One, we're looking for a rebound. All we're looking for is that rebound. And in most cases, we're beginning to see it. It started to happen right around August. And progressively, you're seeing where you, and we're looking at it from a month to month and a year to year standpoint. So if I'm in August of 2020, I've got August 2020 year to date. I'm looking at January through August, month to month to month, to see where that trough is and where that rebound is starting to come up. And then when I see that rebound, and I'm looking at January through May and then June through September on a month to month compared to the previous year in 2019, we begin to see if they're starting to close that gap. And when they're starting to close that gap, that gives us the ability to begin to look forward. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to find a spot where we can start looking forward and to build on that momentum. So for example, if I've got a company that was down 2 or 3 months in the middle of the summer, and then starting in July, in August, September, and October, you can see a progression of increases in revenue and a decline in the percentage of being down from the previous year in 2019 by month. So if you're down in July by 36%, and then in August, you're only down August 2020 versus August 2019, you're down 26%. And then September, you're down 19%. And then in October, you're down 10%. So you're looking for that month to month progression. And once you see that, you start looking forward, and that's what we're doing. So once you find that rebound, all we're doing is we're taking the information that we have at that moment, and we're projecting out for 12 months. And at some point, and that point is probably coming soon, we may take the approach that 2020 is just a flat out anomaly and may just disregard it altogether.
Wow.
We're getting to a point now where we're beginning to see some of that come through. So I would venture a guess that by Q1 2021, if businesses have pulled out of that trough and have pulled back to even compared to 2019, or even progressed slightly higher than that, 2020 at that point goes away. And now you're looking forward, and the valuation is going to be based on that. For now, that's how we're treating it.
Darren, wow, that was fantastic. I mean, that was a lot of information there. I want to backtrack. There's a few questions I want to ask you with all that information that you were doing. So when you're saying you look forward, you're just basically saying creating a pro forma 12 months out, but you need to find that spot where the business is starting to go back up and level out where it used to be. Okay, that makes sense. And I do want to come back to throwing out the 2020 numbers, because I've heard other appraisers are throwing out the 2020 numbers, but I wanted to go back to the labor situation real quick. So if the PPP monies are not included in the P&L and the business did suffer last year, their labor costs might be 38%, where, in 2019, 2018, maybe it's 30%. We shouldn't touch normalizing or adjusting those labor costs. The most we could probably do is just put a footnote on the financials that we're recasting, that's why the labor costs are high, and moving forward, they should come back normal. That's the most we can do. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're looking at two things here, and Tom hit it right on the head. We look at the same things that he's looking at too. As a percentage of revenue, those numbers aren't going to look so good. But if you're looking at, again, year to date 2020 versus year to date 2019, and your labor costs are essentially the same or somewhere near the same, which is what they should be. Maybe you lay off a few people, maybe you got rid of a few people, so your labor costs may be down a little bit. But if you're through October and your labor costs are at $220,000, and in the previous year 19 it was somewhere around 225 or 230, you're looking to make sure that the labor is still intact, because that's important. You want to make sure that if your labor is intact, you can continue to fulfill service products and services going forward when the business begins to rebound. So going back to your question, we don't touch that. The percentage of revenue probably will look a little odd, but like you said, we'll footnote it and say, revenue's down, labor's remains intact. PPP money was used to keep the labor force intact. And we expect that the labor force will continue to be intact until something, otherwise shows up. But that's the way we're looking at it.
Okay. I want to touch on the last part that you said, because I find it really interesting. So you're looking at that possibly throwing 2020 numbers completely out because it's very abnormal, right?
Yeah, but I think you make the key point there, which is the term abnormal. So an anomaly obviously is one of those years where you have something that wasn't planned or controlled that just occurred. Assuming that you rebound from that in some shape or fashion, right? So if you've got 2020 sandwiched in between 2021 projected based on year-to-date numbers and 2019, and let's say your 2019 revenues were at 2.5 million, your 2020 numbers were at 1.3, and now after 2 or 3 months of first quarter 2021, you're on track back to that 2 million, 2.2 million. You're clearly at that point, 2020 is an anomaly. It's not right. So you remove that from the equation altogether. Our approach to this, and probably it will continue to be our approach in valuing businesses, is that we're going to continue to just look forward at this point. So we've essentially almost eliminated 2020 already, but we're still using some of the information that we can see in 2020 to give us a sense of how we're going to project out looking forward. You may not be at full capacity at this point. You may be at 60 or 70%, and that's where you're holding. And if that's the case, our valuation is going to be based on projections at that capacity looking forward. That's the way we're doing it right now.
Now, I just have a hard time now. I understand why you're doing that and it all makes sense, but I'm just trying to bring this into the real world right now where we said as a business broker trying to sell a business, if a restaurant's running at 60, 70% capacity, and then what it was, 2019, and it's currently running at 60, 70% capacity, for us to do a pro forma moving forward and projecting out how it's going to do once it gets past the pandemic, or, everybody's gotten a shot or whatever thing is like that, the restaurants might still suffer for another 6 or 7 months. I just don't see a buyer paying, full price for that business that's running at 60, 70% though.
Well, you're right, but you're also dealing with an industry that's being hit hard by COVID, and that industry is likely to suffer long term. I mean, at least for the foreseeable year and a half until they rebuild. So it may not be the restaurant that they may buy, but at 60% capacity, assuming the business is still able to remain afloat and turn a profit and generate some positive cash flow. Most smart business owners in that field have been able to adapt, especially in the warmer weather parts of the country where you don't have to worry about snow or cold weather. But even in some of the northern parts of the country, I've seen a lot of restaurants that are adapting by Tom, you may be able to comment on this. Igloos, outside igloos.
But they're putting portable fish houses out in their parking lots and putting heaters.
Exactly. So they're dealing with the capacity issue by creating outside capacity through covered areas with funneled in heat. I mean, it's incredible. So
that's amazing.
It really is. So going back to your point though, is that it really depends. If you're trying to sell now, and you're a restaurant owner and you're at 60% capacity, the valuation is going to represent that 60% capacity in terms of revenue and cash flow. And the valuation is going to be back at 60% of what the value would have been in 2019, right? But if you're a e-commerce business or other types of retail businesses that were able to adapt and conform to these regulations, and they've slowly gotten back to a normal pattern of revenue and income, you might see that value today is similar to what it would have been in 2019. So that's why I say 2020 can be an anomaly, but you have to take it on a business by business basis.
Perfect.
It
Okay.
depends.
That all makes sense, Darren. Totally understand. So, and I get why you're throwing that out in 2020. If the business is starting to rebound and it's starting to do well, and you can track it for a couple months that is doing a pro forma moving forward, totally makes sense. I got to flip this over to Lynn though, because I know that there's rules in for the SBA, Lynn, right? That the SBA really concentrates on the last 12 months finance. I mean, they wait all 3 years, but they really concentrate on the last 12 months. How would the SBA look at something like that to get an SBA loan done?
Right. So the SBA has in their SOPs has a specific debt service coverage ratio that you have to meet in the last full year and the interim. That's in the SOP. So all SBA lenders need to meet that as you're looking to do your analysis. Let's say you had a business that's going 18, 19, great, upward trends, stable trends, whatever, 2020 happens. Depending on the industry, you may have a business that's not affected at all, which is fine. Then the lender does their normal analysis of 2020 and the interim, and you move on. There are some that were sort of semi-affected, but not like horribly affected. So you're still going to get your ratios that meet the SOP, and you may have downward trends in revenues and profitability, but you still have enough profitability there to meet your ratios. So that lenders are okay with too. They don't like to see a down year, but obviously there's an explanation. So you explain it and you write up and you move on. Then you're going to have those like the restaurants, like some daycares. You're going to have some of those industries that were very negatively affected by it, to the point where you're not getting your cash flow ratios that you need to get that deal approved. However, if the lender can make a case, as Darren was saying, that you get the same period interim numbers, you can see where you get monthlies for 2020 and monthlies for 2019, and you see a major drop, but then you start to see towards the end of the year it's starting to come up. The borrower has a plan to bring those revenues back up at least to 2019 levels. Lenders do have the ability to look at deals on a projection basis. And I suspect that might be the way we're going to be looking at a lot of different requests for those businesses that just are not meeting those ratios, but that the lender feels very confident that the buyer is able to get that business back up to the 2019 levels at least, to make it viable. So we do have the ability to make a decision on projections. It's just that you've got to jump through a lot more hoops to make it happen. Business plan, big projections, solid projections, solid assumptions, and then a lot more documentation from a financial standpoint.
But at the end of the day, and it's a lot more work, for you. And I'm sorry about that, Lynn. I think I gotta say for everybody, 2020 and 2021, it's a lot more work for all of us, everybody on this, on the as panelists and as attendees. So, so it sounds like what the SBA is going to look at really kind of reflects what Darren said, that as long as the business is trending back up and it's been showing that for a while, that you can work off the projections of the pro formas moving forward. That's really good news. Now, I know with the SBA lending, one of the biggest criteria is besides credit worthiness and stuff, is the experience of the buyer. Does the experience of the buyer play even more into a situation like that, or what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've got an industry, a business that is not showing, again, you're showing decent revenues, decent profitability, 17, 18, 19, good trends, everything that a lender wants to see in a business, and then it tanks in 2020, you're not getting your ratios. The person still wants to buy the business, the seller still wants to sell the business, the price is such that Darren can value it at whatever they've agreed on. The key to that buyer is going to be direct industry experience. So for a lender to get behind the fact that this buyer is going to be able to turn things around or continue to keep the turnaround going that possibly the seller has already started to create, that direct industry experience is going to be extremely, extremely important.
Even a lot more so than normal, which it normally is very, very important.
Yeah, but it's important, but sometimes you can have somebody who's not has the direct experience, but has relatable experience. So, that we can always look at too, and we do when we're doing an underwrite. But when you're going to get to these industries that really have suffered, and you need to convince the lender that this business is going to be viable in 2021 and going forward, you're going to need a buyer that has
Okay.
that industry experience.
And I know there's a lot of people chiming in right now in the chat. They're asking about the businesses that did really well. I want to get to that in a moment. I want to go back to Darren real quick, and I'm going to give you some love too in a minute, Tom. Darren, I want to go back to you real quick. So on the businesses, I know you guys building pro forma, and like businesses that are starting to rebound, you might throw out 2020, but the businesses that are running, let's say it's 60, 70%, where you're stuck using 2020 numbers. I know you guys as appraisers usually do a weighted average, for the last 3 years. Do you change that weighted average at all, or does that stay the same?
It really depends. I know it's not a very clear answer, but I think from our standpoint, it comes down to information. So we are digging deep to really get a sense of where the business is. Like Lynn's talking about, we're looking year to year, month to month, quarter to quarter. We're doing deep interviews with our clients and the borrowers. If we're working for an SBA lender, we're talking with the borrowers to understand exactly where this business is at this point. So the questions are being asked: where you shut down? How long? What's the state mandate right now? Have you laid off anybody? Have you furloughed anybody? Have you had to retrain new workers? We're looking for a sense of stability. And so in the case of 2020 being down, and we're still looking at 2020 numbers, we're not, I'll go back to what I said earlier. We're not looking behind us anymore. We are to an extent to get a benchmark of where they have been historically in terms of size and capacity. But what we're looking at right now is based on 2020, where are you at right now? What are you showing? Mm-hmm. Are you down, and are you continuing to go down, or have you shown that rebound? As soon as we see the rebound and there's a consistent 3 and 4 month to month, year over year progression, as Lynn mentioned, that's what we're beginning to grasp onto. So we're not doing any kind of a weighted average, with the exception of those businesses that are really not being impacted by COVID at all. Some of those businesses are taking advantage of the pandemic, obviously, based on their business model and what they offer to their markets. Some businesses just aren't being affected at all, just because of the nature of the work that they do. So, in those situations, we're valuing them as normal. We're looking at historical, we're looking at interim, we're looking at projected, and we may do a weighted average of those years, that period, or not. It just depends. So, there's at this point in time, and at least for the foreseeable future, there's no one size fits all to what we're doing. We're taking this on a case by case basis, and every business is a little bit different, and we're just trying to get information.
And Darren, I think that's really important, and I want business brokers to know this, and maybe I'll use myself as an example. I recently was working with a seller that I did a broker's opinion of value on that business, and I presented that broker's opinion of value to the seller. But there was a few things about the business and what's been going on with the business that I had some uncertainty, and I didn't feel extremely confident. I was probably 85% confident in the broker's opinion of value that I did. And I told the seller that. And then I, had the seller come to you, Darren, to do an appraisal. I've been doing this for 20 years. I feel like I can do pretty good broker opinion of values, but sometimes, we're just in a weird situation. Like you said, you got to look at every business a little bit different. It doesn't always fit. And I just felt better sending the seller and said, hey, look, it's worth a few $1,000s to go to Darren, get an appraisal done on the business. This is what you're studying day in and day out. I mean, this is what you guys do. This is your 100% of your work is the valuations. And I think anybody that's listening right now, if you're working on a business and you're struggling with doing a broker's opinion of value, you might want to talk them into contacting Darren and getting an appraisal done.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. We set people straight. I mean, we're not going to sugarcoat it for you. I mean, our job is to be indirect and non-partial, and as professionals and as appraisers, we want to make sure that whoever comes to us gets our expertise, and that expertise sometimes comes in good news and sometimes in bad news. So we just want to make sure that as long as we're operating from all the information that's available to us, we'll provide a good solid conclusion for anybody that we work with. But like you said, sometimes if you don't feel right, and by the way, we get to a point there too where we see things that we just don't feel good about, and you have to start asking some tough questions, and sometimes you get the answers you're looking for, and sometimes you don't. You can only do with what you got. So it is a unique time. Luckily, the majority of the people that we've worked with over the last 6 to 8 months have been pretty forward about providing us with whatever we need, and it's good to have. Information is good.
Is there any, and maybe there is not, do you have any recommendations for business brokers out there when they're doing a valuation on a business that's been suffered by the pandemic?
Well, if you can wait.
We don't like hearing that as brokers. I do tell some. I've been telling some of them.
Obviously, if you can hold it out, because it comes down to value if you have that ability. But if you don't, and you're in a position where you have to sell, information is critical right now. So the best that you can do to support, I keep going back to the same term, but I'll say it again. You got to find the rebound. If you can support that rebound, even if it's just tiny, just something to progress you into the right direction of forward instead of backwards. If you can just find that, you have something to work with, because at that point you can start looking forward. It may not be easy, but looking forward at this point from a value standpoint is what your objective is as a business owner. And as a business broker, your job is to try to help find that for them or with them.
Right.
And if you can find that, then looking forward, at least there is some support for it.
Right. Okay, good. Somebody was asking, how much your rates are. And I think this is going to go on YouTube. And so this might be around for a few years. After this is done, I'm going to email everybody a link to that YouTube video, and it will have Tom Osborne, Lynn Singletary's and Darren's contact information on the YouTube underneath their name. So if you click on the video and you watch it, you can go to Darren's and see Darren's email will be on there. Just email Darren and, ask him that question. I don't, because it could change. And I think it depends on the business and the type of valuation that you want done and everything like that, or appraisal you want done. So let's move on to, how about the businesses that are doing extremely well because of the pandemic? How are we handling that, Darren, from an appraisal standpoint?
I'll have a quick answer to that, and some of the others can chime in on it as well. We look at it the same way. We're looking for really just a couple things. One, why are they? Did they have to change anything, or is it just a matter of incoming business as a result of people? Construction, home construction, contracting, seeing a nice bump, landscaping, all kinds of other things that people are doing at home. We recognize that is a short-term bump, unless the pandemic has caused them to change their business model in a way that allows them to add another product or service going long-term. There's two different things that you got to look at. So if it's just normal, they haven't changed anything, but they're getting that bump of revenue because of demand as a result of people being home. We know at some point this year that people will start going back to work in person. We know it's coming. It's just a matter of when. My guess is it's just pure speculation on my part, but I'm thinking probably sometime middle of summer, that trend should start to show if it hasn't shown already. And when that happens, a lot of these businesses that are seeing that bump are going to start to see that pull back a little bit. So, from that standpoint, you really look at it as short term. And, if it's short term, that too may in fact be an anomaly that you have to perhaps disregard. You got to dive into that a little bit. If it's something that they can maintain, you got to ask about it. If it's just demand, that demand is going to slow at some point. So you got to factor that into your equation.
Lynn, how are you guys, the lenders, looking at that in the SBA?
I think we would be looking at 2019. So, before the pandemic. So how is the business doing in 2019, 2018, before the pandemic? And if it was doing well then, and we can get our numbers, at least, ratios in 2019 that makes the bank happy and the SBA happy, I think we're good to go. So, but if you've got a 2019 that's not, showing sufficient debt service, and then you get into 2020 and it's rocking and rolling, that's going to be something that we're going to take a pretty hard look at, and probably, again, like Darren said, is it something that is there a product line or whatever that they brought on that's going to continue? Show us, tell us what that is, explain to us what's going on there. If it isn't, then it's going to be something that we're going to have to take a harder look at and probably have a concern about.
All right, great. Anybody out there, I want to start. That was all my questions I had today, but I know there's a lot of people that have questions out there. Anybody that's listening that has a question right now, please raise your virtual hand, and then I'll invite you in, and you can ask the questions directly to our three panelists: Darren Mize, who's an appraiser; Tom Osborne, who's a CPA; and Lynn Singletary, who's an SBA lender. You can ask directly to that. I know that we have some questions in the chat. I'm always going to take the questions that are live, where people are raising the hands, and bring it on. I'll always take those first, and then we'll try to get to the ones on the chat messages and the question mark. While people are raising their hands, virtual hands, I wanted to go back to you, Tom, and ask you a question. And maybe you know this, maybe you don't, I don't know, but the SBA last year, anybody that had an SBA loan, an old SBA loan or a new SBA loan, they got 6 months of that loan paid for by the federal government, principal and interest, and they're doing that again this year. How is that going to be contributed on the financials?
Principal payments are going to be treated as debt forgiveness. So they'll end up as other income. And actually the entire payment, each payment is going to be treated as debt forgiveness, and they'll be able to get it. The way we're treating it is we take the interest deduction, take the entire payment, put it as debt forgiveness income, and adjust the principal for the amount, the principal of the note for the amount of that payment. So we record it pretty much the same as we would any mortgage payment, except that the entire payment is going to be debt forgiveness income.
Okay, great.
Can I ask Jim and Tom, is that also going to be excluded from taxes?
Not that I'm aware of. I think the only program that was going to be excluded from taxes that I know of right now is the PPP program, but I'm not 100% familiar with the taxability of the SBA program, but as far as I know right now, it's taxable.
So, hey, before we move on, you can take these questions. I'm going to bring Dawn on in a minute, and he can ask this question. But before we do that, I want to say this too, is getting off subject a little bit, but we did the webinar a couple of weeks ago about PPP monies and SBA loans moving forward. And everybody that currently has an SBA loan, even if they got 6 months of P&I paid for last year, they are eligible for 3 months this year, up to $9,000 a month. And I went through all the people that I sold businesses to the last few years, and I've been calling them, letting them know about the second round of PPP money, and also letting them know that they can apply for another 3 months of SBA loans. Almost everybody I talked to knew about the second round of PPP monies. Very few people actually knew about the 3 months of SBA loans. And, it's just goodwill. You should do it because you're a good human being. And this is information you should share with past, buyers that you've worked with that now are business owners. But one of the people that I talked to today was the last person I was on my list, actually. She and her husband are looking to buy more businesses because they can get the 6 months if they do another SBA loan. So, just you want to say that's a really good tip. Just go back to everybody that you've worked with that had SBA loans in the last few years and let them know that is there. And don't expect anything out of it. Just do it because you're a good human being. But you give good things out there in this world, they come back to you good. Go ahead, Lynn. I'm sorry.
Jim, the lenders should automatically give those people starting February 1st their P&I payments up to $9,000.
Automatically?
Yeah.
Oh,
they
wow.
don't have
Okay.
to apply for anything. It should be done automatically. And on top of that,
I didn't know that.
If you're in a specifically hard hit industry, restaurants are one, education, so daycares, there's a couple of other ones, a list of them. They will get an additional 5 months of P&I payments.
Wow. So up to 8 months.
Yes. Yeah. Up to $9,000. So starting February 1st. So restaurants, daycares, I can't remember, bars, obviously, Those industries that were the hardest hit get an extra 5 months.
And it happens automatically.
Happens automatically.
Well, you know what? Then I didn't realize that. So I'm glad you clarified that. But, I think that's even more important that next week, everybody that's listening to this should call and give their past buyers that good news, so they're hearing that good news from you. And, you beat that February 1st deadline. So that's great. So Dawn, are you with us? Can you tell us where you're calling from?
Calling from Boulder, Colorado.
Well, welcome, Dawn.
Hey,
What's
it's
the
good to be
question?
on. Thanks.
Oh, it's great to have you.
So, and thanks for letting me ask a question about a specific listing. So I've got a brew pub. They did 2.5 million in revenues in 2019. Obviously, that was a year without COVID implications. In 2020, they dropped about 20%, both in revenue and in cash flow. They managed their business really well. They kept their SDE. By the way, the 2.5 million in 2019 yielded $360,000 in clean SDE. And their drop was clearly, it was COVID. I mean, they had all the restrictions you would expect. They had closed days, partial days, restricted seating, all that kind of stuff. And they're in a ski resort area. So 2021, the ski areas are going to be restricted. The restaurant's going to be restricted. They'll probably be down during the winter season, as anyone would expect. But they have a lot of outdoor seating. They had a strong summer in 2020. Actually, 1 month was higher than 2019. And by winter of 2022, a year from now, the vaccines hopefully are taking hold. They want to sell now. And I want to price them on their 2019 results. Does that seem reasonable?
I'll jump in real quick.
Yeah.
I'm thinking. I think that it is not an unreasonable approach if you are at this point showing that the operation is approaching 2019 numbers. If you are close to or already there, I think that is certainly fine. If you expect that 2022 is when that's going to occur, you might have a hard time selling that to anybody who's wanting to buy that brew pub at full price, because if the numbers aren't supporting that price at this point, you can't really go on speculation. Now, support can be all kinds of different things. It can be a trend. It can be year-to-date financials. It can be year-over-year or month-over-month growth. But you got to be able to support it. So if you're not at a point now where the business is at or near where it was in 2019, I think you got to hold off until you can start showing that. If you are, then I think you're fine. But beyond that, I don't know that I would. You might have a tough time selling that.
Well, as a restaurant, they just have dining restrictions. They can only have so many bodies in the space.
Right.
So that's what's killing them.
Right. And that if that stays in place for the foreseeable next 6 to 8 months, not much you can do about that. Once they open up those restrictions and that money starts to increase a little bit, you got something to really grab onto. But until that point comes, and nobody knows when that restriction is going to be lifted, not much you can do about that.
Lynn, you concur with that from an SBA lending standpoint? Yep.
Yeah, I agree. It would be a hard underwrite. You'd have to really pay attention to the 2020 numbers somewhat, and then.
Well, 2020, they were still able to get 300,000 SDE clean, but they didn't get the 360.
Yeah,
60.
That's not a horrible decline.
Yeah, that's
No,
not.
it's not a bad year. I agree.
Having said that, though, 60 grand and discretionary cash flow still from a value standpoint, anywhere from $150,000 to $200,000 so in value. So
Right.
It's all relative.
Yeah. You have any other follow-up questions, Don? Thank you, Don. Thanks for joining us.
I bet.
Ron, are you with us? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from San Francisco.
Oh, well, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, this question is mostly, I think, for Darren. I heard somewhere, or I read somewhere, that you were affiliated with Peer Comps at some point, one of the founders, and I use that tool. And let's use the last gentleman's example. Could you not build projections for, based on current trends, and then go back in and use the weighting tool by year so that you weighted 2019 X percent, 2020, which was impacted, he said 20%, weight that down, and then weight the projected 12 months as a higher weighting? Would that not be a good way to use that tool and get a sellable value?
I think when it comes to weighting cash flow, the resulting weighted average has to reflect what the business, what a hypothetical buyer should expect in terms of the cash flow in the next 12 months. So, if you're weighting is really all about following trends. So in this particular case, if you're going behind 2020 into 2019 as part of your weighting, the resulting weight and resulting cash flow estimate has to be something that is reasonable looking forward. And if it is, I think it's okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. From an appraisal standpoint, my approach is really more discounted cash flow at this point. So there's no weighting of anything. It's 100% based on projected earnings. And that's the way we're treating it right now. But for those businesses that are partially affected, without any significance, I don't have a problem with weighting, doing any kind of a weighting of cash flow. I think, again, it goes back to the circumstance of the business that you're looking at. It's appropriate in some cases, maybe not in others.
And really, I think at this point, 6 to 8 months is not, I think we're probably talking 6 to 8 months. Once, the vaccination's out, if they can get those shots in people's arms, I think people are going to be itching to go out. And I think we're going to go through a boom time. I don't know. That's my personal opinion. So
you just got to wait for it. It's something's going to happen here in the next 6 months. We just got to sit back and wait and see what that's going to be.
Ron, do you have a follow-up question?
No, that did it. Thank you.
Hey, Ron, thanks for joining us. Mark, are you there? Where are you calling from, Mark?
Yes, I'm calling from New Jersey. How are you guys?
Oh, welcome. Doing very
Good,
well.
good. Very good. I want to get an opinion on e-commerce business. I have one that I've been working with for like a year, and there was doing about 1.4 in sales, and he had a COVID bump up to like 1.8, and he wants to raise the price of this business. And I feel like, well, it's just a COVID bump and it doesn't warrant an increase. But I'm just curious what you guys think about e-commerce businesses.
Lynn, what are you guys seeing in the lending industry with this industry?
Right. So e-commerce, it's become such a viable industry, like you said, especially 2020. Now the question, I think we as lenders have is, so a lot of people are buying things online now that you never did before 2020. And I think there's even a lot of people that never bought anything online, but then started doing it because of the pandemic. So the question is, in the lender's mind is, and maybe your buyer too, is this a pattern that people will continue to do even when you can go out again and buy stuff or go somewhere or go to the grocery? Will people be used to just buying the groceries online or buying whatever online versus going to the retail store? I tend to think yes. I tend to think people are going to get used to the convenience of it and probably continue to do that. So for that business, again, I think we'd have to look at, the history of 18 and 19 and then into 2020, what products are people buying? Does it make sense that these buying habits will continue into 2021 of whatever? So it depends on what they're selling. I would think the products. I think that you could probably make a case that it will probably continue because again, I think people's habits can change in that area because of just getting used to having things delivered at your door instead of.
Yeah, that was our big question. It's primarily flatware and glassware like imported, above normal it's from Europe. So it's high quality stuff, nice stuff.
So you guys,
And,
so you have to ask yourself then, how much did the 2020 pandemic create their profitability in 2020 or higher revenues? Or is it something that the company did market-wise, marketing-wise? Did they bring, in a different product line? Did they start marketing differently? All of that could be just in normal business protocol versus.
And it might not even be black and white. It might be, more people are going to buy stuff online, I think, when this pandemic's, because they got used to it, but will they be doing it at the capacity that they're doing at right now,
Yeah. And some of the retail stores are going out. I mean, some of the retail stores are filing for bankruptcy and closing. So are the things they selling things that would be sold in retail that may not even be there anymore, may not even be viable for them to go out and find this product in a store? You could make a case that could continue into 2021 and 2022.
Mark, do you have any follow-up?
No, I think that's good. That's kind of what I needed. I appreciate the feedback.
Hey, appreciate you joining us today, Mark. Thank you so much. Todd, are you with us?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm awake.
Thank you.
Oh, Todd, never mind.
Where are you calling from, Todd?
Reno, Nevada.
Oh, okay. Welcome.
Thank you. So this is probably a question for everybody. I was talking to a client this morning, owns a restaurant, and she indicated that, well, I'm losing money. I've lost money all 2020, continue to lose money, but I spent $350,000 in the recent months to improve my restaurant. So pretty much a remodel. She says, what is it worth? So I wanted to know what your opinion is of that, probably coming from Darren, mostly.
In terms of how the remodel impacts the value?
Yeah, I mean, she's asking me, what can I get out of my restaurant if I'm losing money, but I spent $300,000 recently to remodel it? In other words, what is that, just the equipment worth? And I have an opinion, but I wanted to hear yours.
Well, I think I would venture a guess that you'll get 3 different answers from the 3 people on this panel. From my approach in valuation, unless that remodel has generated any additional revenue or cash flow, there's no value to it. I'm not saying that there isn't any value to having it. I'm just saying that at a time when you invest, just like when you buy inventory, or just when you buy and invest in equipment, you don't get a value bump right out of the gate when you buy it. It takes some time for that piece of equipment, or in this case, the remodel, to show the return on that investment. So from a valuation standpoint, at this point, there's really no value, except if your balance sheet obviously will show that as fixed assets, how you account for that. And maybe Tom can say what his opinion on there, but from a balance sheet standpoint, there's value to it. From an income and overall business value, probably none at all.
Okay.
I would say a problem you're going to have with that, given that it's the restaurant business, you might be looking, even if it's new used equipment, you might be looking at liquidation value in the best case scenario, because you're not going to have a lot of people getting into that industry right now, unless they already have a chain of restaurants, they have a lot of capital.
Right. And at that point, wouldn't you say, Tom, that the space probably isn't even attractive at that point either?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do you think, Tom, the value is for restaurant equipment in a liquidated scenario? Is it 10% of the original value, 15, 20, 30? What do you think it is?
I'd look at auction value, because of something like that, you're probably looking at putting it in an auction, and it all depends on who shows up, and if you look at the building, there's a lot of people that are buying property and doing section 351 or section 1030. They're doing tax-free. I'm getting my COVID back, Jim. I'm stuttering here. Sorry.
Oh, we're hanging up.
But anyway, if they do a tax-free exchange, there's a lot of people that are buying property, to save taxes on property they've sold. So some real property I'm in Minnesota. I'm in the agriculture area. Farmland is holding up its property value because people are selling appreciated property and replacing it through a tax-free exchange. So a lot of property values are being inflated because of that.
Yeah, I'm just referring to equipment of a restaurant. How does the bank
Todd,
look at that,
Todd,
Lynn?
I'm sorry to interrupt, and I apologize if I missed this because I'm trying to run the webinar and listen, so I might have missed this. Are they thinking about just selling the equipment, or are they doing a sale of assets with the lease and everything?
Right, they'd want somebody to take over the lease as well and just buy it for the asset value.
Okay, so
fixtures, the FF&E.
So I sold a lot of sale of assets of restaurant back in the Great Recession, and the equipment in place is worth more money than if you were just going to sell the equipment itself. Because you already have it in place. It's already hooked up because, the equipment is like 10 cents on the dollar. Restaurant equipment, once you buy it, it's 10 cents on the dollar.
10 cents.
But it costs so much money to have like plumbers come out, electricians come out. So the fact that equipment is sitting inside of a leasehold place and it's hooked up and it's already hooked up, it's going to carry more value than if you rip that equipment out and you sold it off. So what that equipment is, I used to just go around, I hate to say it, but I used to know a gut check. Like I could walk around the restaurant and go, I think somebody would pay 75 grand for this, or somebody would pay 90,000 for it, and I hate to say it, but it was a gut check because I was selling so many things that I knew what buyers were willing to pay. And it was more of just, I hate to say it, but it was more of a gut instinct from,
so if you think
I just had sold so many at that time.
So if you think it's there and operating and the restaurant's operating, maybe that value of the equipment is more than 15% of the original value or what?
Yeah, I would say definitely more than 15%. If you got the leasehold improvements too, so you're selling a restaurant, an asset sale restaurant, even if they're closed down, there's that value in there because somebody's going to come along. You got to remember, to build out a restaurant, it might cost you $300,000 between doing architectural, doing the build out, buying the equipment, getting it hooked up. If somebody can come in and they can buy that for $75,000, close the restaurant down for 30 days, spend another $25,000 changing it up a little bit, maybe painting and, spending 25, maybe laying down new tile or whatever it is that they're doing, open up 30 days later. They're getting a restaurant for a third of the price that they would be getting at if they did a build out from scratch. And two, they're doing it in a month or 6 weeks instead of taking 8 months to a year. So, that's what you got to look at is how much would it cost for somebody to open this up, from scratch in a vanilla shell, in a shell versus, buying this and opening it up. And if they can look at it and say, it's going to cost a third or a quarter of what it would cost me, they'll pay it.
Okay. Will the bank loan on that, Lynn?
So the way the bank would look at it is basically a startup. So, as Jim said, so someone's going in there, they're going to buy the tenant improvements, they're going to pay the seller somewhat for the products that she put in there, or the build out that she did and her equipment. They're certainly not going to get dollar for dollar. And then they're gonna get the lease, and it depends on how much is left on the lease. But as Jim said, if they're gonna close it down and reopen it under a different concept in a month or two, then it's a startup. And then the lender just has to look at it as a startup and digest, all the aspects of it, the concept, the borrower, the experience, that kind of thing. So
Did they look at the financials?
I'm sorry?
Did they look at the business financials?
Well, you said if she's losing money, you probably don't want to do that.
Is the bank going to require the financials and look at them in that situation? Or are they just going to go off of assets?
Pro forma, probably going to go pro forma, right?
It's going to be a pro forma, and it's a projection deal. So I think
just like if it was a startup,
you would just say you're just going to say the restaurant, the business itself is not being sold. There's no goodwill that this buyer is buying. They're just buying the assets, and it's a startup. It's a projection deal.
Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting. That's kind of been my thought there, especially with you, Jim. That's kind of what I suggested. If she had to sell, if she's not personally guaranteeing on the lease, then she could liquidate those assets, but may not be able to get more than half.
Oh, I wouldn't even say, I don't think she'll get
Yeah,
half.
probably not even half.
You know,
No,
I was kind of
I'm thinking
actually,
15, 20%.
I hate to say it, but because I hate to be a dream killer, you know.
Yeah, it's 15, 20%. I mean,
that's right. That's what I kind of
yeah.
told her in the first part is 15%, but I've been accused of being a dream killer in the past.
We all are, I think. All of us business brokers are, I think.
Right.
They all think what they got is worth more. And, the thing is, they got $300,000 in the place and they're trying to recuperate $300,000. It's like buying stock in Apple. You buy stock in Apple at $1,000. That's probably a bad example right now. But, and it drops to $600. You can't sell it for $1,000. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and you got to look at them and say, hey, would you buy this business working 60 hours a week like you are right now, not making any money? And would you pay $300,000? And they'd be like, I wouldn't pay $300,000 to work 60 hours a week and make no money. And like, no buyer will. So you're going to change the concept. So do we answer your question, Todd?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so Marcio, are you there? Where are you calling from?
Yes, I am. I'm from Boca Raton.
Oh, okay. All right. Welcome.
So I have a technical question for Darren. When he does the discount cash flow, what interest he use? What the criteria to use that? Because this is kind of a puzzle for me as well. What is your criteria to do that?
Well, you have to have a good set of projections for one. It's something to base it off and support it. Just got to remember, discount rates based on risk, not interest rates. So fair market value is based on hypothetical willing buyer, willing seller, cash or cash equivalent. So the interest rates really don't come into play. They do come into play when it comes to risk on the accessibility of capital. But that's really one of many components that make up our discount rate. So the discount rate is essentially a multiple. If you want to look at it from a simplistic standpoint. So in order to do discounted cash flow, you need a good solid set of projections that come with some assumptions that make that projection supportable and reasonable. And then you have to have a discount rate that reflects all of the variable risk components of the business that you're trying to value. I don't know that I could get into a lot of the detail on discounted cash flow because it's a 4-day class by itself.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, part of my accreditation in business valuation was nothing but the income approach, which is discounted cash flow. We spent 4 days on it, and then I got tested on it. So it's not something that's easily explained, but in simplistic format, it's cash flow and risk. And future risk at that point. So that's really the two primary components of it.
Thank you. Second question is for Lynn in terms of last year I had the EIDL from SBA. What is the procedure for from now for 2021? What is the similar of EIDL on the PPP program?
You mean applying for the EIDL?
Yes.
I believe it's closed. I don't believe, unless you already had an application in, I do not believe the EIDL loans are still available. I don't think they're taking new applications.
So in terms of the new rules, if I'm a broker and I want to improve my marketing of my business, I will not have the fund for do that?
I don't believe that, the EIDL loans, I believe, are not available anymore. If you go on the SBA.gov website, you can find the loans that you could apply for there if it's still available.
Okay, thank you.
It's not.
All right. Dustin, are you there?
Hey,
Where are you
Jim.
calling from? Hi.
Hey, Darren.
Hey, guys.
Hey, I'm in Northern Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So, quick question, going back to the, kind of projecting of 2020, 2021 revenue, or not even 2021 revenue specifically, but, if you had a business that wasn't performing well, obviously during 2020 due to COVID, and, looking at, okay, you found the trough, you see that it's rebounding, it's down 30%, 20%, 10%. At what point do you think, for the brokers out there that are looking for kind of not that back of the napkin type of valuation, but, you're having a general conversation with a seller and you don't want to get too much into the weeds with them, and but you want to try to give them help, and you have a good understanding that you can share with them to say, hey, where are you at now compared to where you were in 2019, where we could then say, we're gonna potentially just throw out 2020, and would we then just say, well, look at your previous 3 years before that? So 2020 is that anomaly, and then 2017, 18, 19 was pretty consistent. Whether it was flat those years or trending up. But at what point do you think we can really kind of just let's just look at 17 through 19, seeing that it's kind of become stable again?
Well, I think after you look at the first quarter of 2021 and you are in a position where cash flow and revenue is at or near 2019, if you annualize it, and not even annualize it, but just on a year over year standpoint, you look at that, and then you look at the first quarter. So if you, at that point, you look at quarter one 2019, quarter one 2020, quarter one 2021, you can see, if you can see that 2020 is sandwiched in between two relatively consistent years, I think at that point you can begin the idea of supporting the approach that 2020 is an anomaly. So in 2021, where we are right now, we're going to be approaching that sometime in the next couple of months. If you're still looking at 2020 numbers, a little harder to support that. But as you mentioned, and as Lynn had mentioned earlier today, when you start looking at month over month P&Ls, and you're September, October, November into 2020, and you're looking at September, October, November 19, and you are closing the gap to where 2020 is down to less than 5% of where it was in the same month in the prior year, and you're comfortable with the progression of the trend, right? So going all the way back to June or July, and you're at 36 down, 25 down, 20 down, 18 down, 12 down, 6 down, 3 down. That's a pretty good track record at that point, that the business has found the trough, rebounded, and now is progressing into closing the gap to where it was in 2019. At that point, I think you can start looking forward and maybe bringing 19 in as a basis of value. What we're doing is we're taking the most recent month, and if that month is down 3%, then we're projecting out 3% less than where it was in 2019. To me, that's the best, most conservative way to approach it until you actually hit zero, and filling that gap. And at that point, I think you can start looking forward and forget about 2020, but we're not there yet.
And I think, Lynn, you would probably concur on that from the bank standpoint, but you got to remember, as a business broker standpoint, we still got to convince the buyer that those numbers are going to stay looking like that as well. Darren can do his appraisal work, and Lynn can say yes in the SBA front, but it starts with us talking to the buyer, and the buyer understanding, that the numbers are back. Hey, look, we don't have much time. We're over the amount of time we had. I just want to do a fire round real quick on some of these questions people are typing in. I think we can answer these really quick in a few seconds. Darren, if you're throwing 2020 out, would you need 3 years of financials like 17, 18, and 19 then at that point?
We'd still look at them. Doesn't mean we'll use them, but we'd like to see them.
Okay. Lynn, I'm not sure if this was answered earlier. Will the 6 months of SBA principal and interest payments be considered taxable income? I guess that's your question, Tom.
That's Tom.
Yeah, I as far as I know, I think it is. I haven't seen anything out there that says it's not. I only have a few clients that are getting that benefit right now, and we'll be revisiting it when we do their tax returns, but as of right now, I'm not aware of anything that says it's not taxable.
Okay.
But that's not saying it could be. I just haven't seen anything on it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we're dealing with the government, so just wait until tomorrow, because tomorrow it may be tax-free.
Yeah, well, it may be taxable today and it may not be taxable tomorrow. You're exactly right. The PPP program changed more than the weather did.
And it's still changing.
Yes.
Hey, Lynn, somebody was asking that they have somebody that bought a business in December 2020. Are they eligible to get their P&I paid for?
No. Unfortunately, the people who closed between September 27th and February 1st miss out on everything.
All right. I think we got everything there, guys. Do you guys have anything else to add? Darren, Lynn, Tom?
No, it's pretty complete.
Yeah, it was good.
I learned a lot from Darren and Tom also.
Yeah, that was a really good program, I think. And I got to tell everybody that's listening right now, I use all three of these people for my services. I use Tom as my CPA. He's been my CPA for, 25 years. I use Lynn all the time for SBA loans. Darren's my go-to guy for appraisals. So if you need anybody's services, reach out and call these people or contact these people. When this goes to YouTube, it will have their name of their company and their contact information up there, so you can reach out. So keep an eye out for that link in the video. Until then, I just want to say this, everybody. Thank you so much. And for all you business brokers out there, continue working hard, continue working smart, and continue making those buyer-seller connections. Until next time, I'll see you later. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it, guys.